All right, so we are going to look at some annotated bibliography entries. These are entries that students who have been in my class in the past have completed. When I copied them into this document, I also copied my notes so you can see how I responded to this student. It should hopefully give you a better idea of what to expect from me, as well as what I expect from you for this assignment. Okay, so the very first thing I do whenever I begin working on a paper for the annotated bibliography is I look at the formatting. So first of all, I'll look to make sure there is a title page there. I don't have an example of one here since this is just sections that I cut and pasted from other students' work. But you do want to make sure that you have that title page present, otherwise you're going to lose some points for that. I also look to see if you have your header. You can see up here at the top we have our header and the page number. As I scroll down, it also shows, the second page, the third page. Okay, so that was set up properly. I'm also looking to see, is your thesis present, right? Because how am I going to understand what your paper's about? How am I going to understand how to read your relevancy comments if I don't have your thesis to refer back to? So that's important to have. And then the last thing I look for in terms of format is, of course, how it's set up and whether or not your list is in alphabetical order. Everything with your references from this point forward should always be in alphabetical order. So we have a source that begins with H, there's an I, and there's an L. Okay, so those are correct, and everything looks good in terms of how they're formatted and the spacing. We've got good hanging indents for our reference page entries, so it looks pretty good format-wise. At that point, I'll kind of dive in and begin looking at the sources. Okay, so first things first, I'll get the APA information out of the way. So I'm going to look at our first source here. We have Hauk, FR, Thompson, JMD, Tanabe, KO, Moon, RY, and Veneman, MM. Okay, so those are all of our authors. They're all listed there. Their names are correct. We've got good punctuation. Everything looks good. So the next thing I look at is our date. And we've got 2011 in parentheses with a period showing that we're done talking about the date. All of that is present. Breastfeeding and reduced risk of sudden infant death syndrome, a meta-analysis. There's our title, very clear. We've got our subtitle capitalized. We've got everything else in lowercase except for, of course, the first letter of our title. So that all looks good. We've got the journal, and I can tell it's a journal because we have our volume right here in italics as well. So we've got pediatrics, comma 128, which is the volume. And then we have the page numbers, 103 to 110. So I have all the information I need about the source, but the student's also given me the DOI, the direct object identifier, which will make it super simple for me to find this source if I wanted to. Okay, so the reference page entry looks great. Let me check on the reference or the in-text citation. So knowing what I know, it's going to be Hauk, comma, Thompson, comma, Tanabe, comma, Moon, comma, and Veneman, comma, 2011. So that's what it should see. And that's what I've got. So that looks correct. This student has also put the alternate version of the in-text citation. So when you have a source from 3 to 7 authors, you always put all of their names in first, and then any future in-text citations are just the lead author with et al., which means and others. So that one looks correct as well, how she's got that formatted. So therefore, this source is ready to go. When the student's writing the paper, she can come in here, get the in-text citations. She knows they're right. She knows they're ready to go. Okay, so that would be 4 points right off the bat that the students has on this annotated bibliography entry. So now I'm going to start reading the annotation for the other 6 points and see what else is there. Okay, so Pediatrics is a monthly peer review publication and is the official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics. This journal's been in publication since 1948. This article is a meta-analysis of 288 studies with data on breastfeeding and sudden infant death syndrome. So that is all our credibility information. I know it's credible because, first of all, it's in a credible journal, right? They've told us who pediatrics is. It's been in publication since 1948. It's published by a very prestigious academy. This looks like something that would be good, right? Anything that's published in this should be good, solid information. To give us even another layer of credibility, we've talked about how extensive the study was, that the meta-analysis looked at 288 studies. So that's 288 papers that someone else published, compiling the study's information together. That's good data. So this is a source that has some really rich data, some good information that's going to help. So we've definitely got all our credibility information there. Then we want to look into our summary, right? Because we want to know what the source is about. And the last sentence that she used for her credibility is also kind of a sentence for the summary, right? Because we want to know about the study. So this article is a meta-analysis of 288 studies with data on breastfeeding and sudden infant death syndrome. So we already know what it's about then too. So that's giving us a good idea of what their thesis was. So the meta-analysis objective was to measure the association between breastfeeding and SIDS. Okay, the study included in this meta-analysis occurred between 1966 and 2009. The meta-analysis yielded the results that breastfeeding was protective against SIDS. This meta-analysis also concluded that the protective effect of breastfeeding is greater when the infant is exclusively breastfed. And we've got breastfeed there, so that's a little bit of a typo. The authors of the meta-analysis recommend that a mother breastfeed her infant and that breastfeeding be exclusive for at least the first 4 to 6 months of life. The authors also recommend that breastfeeding should continue for at least 1 year of age. Lots of good summary information there. She's going to be able to refer back to this and know exactly what it was talking about. Okay, unfortunately, even if we had her thesis here, it's not really clear how this source is going to support her argument. So we're missing that area. We kind of know that it's covering breastfeeding, right, which was her main thesis, but we don't know which of the 3 subpoints is being supported here. So this source is missing that information. We're going to move on to our next example, and that one will have that information in it. Okay, so our next one is the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. I'm going to go ahead and you would not do this in your paper, but I'm going to hit return just so we can get as much of it on one page as we can. Okay, so Institute for Healthcare Improvement, it's our organization who's our author. We've got the year 2014. Reduce Avoidable Readmissions, that's our title. And it's retrieved from, and we have our website address. So we have a lot of really great information here. Reference page, everything looks correct. Now I'm going to go down and look for our in-text citation, knowing what the in-text citation should look like based on this information. I know it should be Institute for Healthcare Improvement, 2014. Oh, and look, there it is, Institute for Healthcare Improvement, 2014. So she's got all her reference information correct. Okay, so let's look at the content then. Let's get all of our other information. So the Institute for Healthcare Improvement is a nonprofit organization leading in the improvement of healthcare worldwide. They have their own school to train future improvement leaders for their company. For 25 years, they've partnered with others, including practitioners, to improve the health of people and populations. The backgrounds of the experts who run this institute range from chief operating officer of a hospital to senior research associate in Cornell University's Department of Policy, Analysis, and Management. This website is also supported by other world-renowned foundations such as Kaiser and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Wow, lots of credibility information. We're talking about the organization, we're talking about the well-known organizations who are supporting this website. We've got a lot of good stuff here. In the paper itself, I would probably use some of this. Maybe I could use the phrase for that they partnered with others for 25 years, so that they'd been around that long. I might talk about how they're supported by other great foundations. I would not use all of this in the paper. That just gets a little bit too wordy. But it's perfectly appropriate and it's excellent for your annotated bibliography. Okay, so full points for credibility, that's all there. Okay, next we're going to dive into some summary. So this website page provides recommended tools, videos, audio, and resources in regards to reducing avoidable readmissions. This page discusses the astounding financial cost caused by readmissions, and although some readmissions are necessary, those that are not can be harmful and, most importantly, avoidable. This page also provides a link to the SMART discharge protocol, which can benefit patient education upon leaving the hospital, and many other readmission prevention sources. Okay, great. So here I know exactly why the page is useful, right? I know they've got all these great tools in the videos. I know they talk about the financial costs, which was important to her paper. And I know that if I want to see the SMART discharge protocol, I can come here to see it. Okay, so there's a lot of information about how the source is useful in terms of the summary, the content, right? We're looking at that. Now we want to go specifically to talk about why the source is relevant to the thesis, right? How is it going to be used in the paper? So this evidence-based information, so still talking about the credibility there, right? This evidence-based information supports my thesis statement to improve patient discharge teaching and the continuation of care once leaving the hospital. So she's actually using this source for two different parts of her thesis statements, two of her subpoints, one being to improve patient discharge teaching, and the second being the continuation of care once leaving the hospital. So this is going to be a great source from her because she can use it in two places. These various tools provided on this website help to support in favor of my argument in the prevention of readmissions, as stated in their own thesis statement on the page. Okay, so she's found a source that has the same primary goal, right, to prevent readmissions. So their thesis statement and her thesis statement are meshing in that main claim, but they're differing in terms of how the subpoints, how they're proving that claim through their 3 points for this student. Okay, so great. This is a really great example. It's covering all your bases, and they've actually gone over and above what they needed to provide, but it works out pretty well. All right, so and you can see over here that that one got full points. Now, before I go into this next one, I want to talk a little bit about why I'm including this one. So this is a good example of how you can do a lot of the stuff that I'm asking you to do, but you can do it in a way that's not going to help, right? Because the information in this last sort is a little bit unreliable, and I'll talk about that as we go through it. But I do want you to see a bad example as well, because I think there's a lot that you can learn from seeing something that had a lot of room for improvement. Okay, so here we've got this one. I'm going to start, as usual, with my reference page entry. Lewis, J. So we've got our author, 2005, January 1. That's correct. That's the date. Film and American Pop Culture. There's our title. Retrieved September 16th from this site. This is okay. Currently, APA does not require you to put a retrieval date, but past versions of APA do. So some people still include it. I would not take points off if you included it, but it is unnecessary. You can just say retrieved from website. You don't need to have the date in there. Okay, so reference page entry at first look looks great, but I went ahead and checked on it. I check on all of the sources that come through. And here we go. I go to the site and the URL doesn't work. And I find a similar address with it that has HTM at the end, but it's written by somebody different and it's about a different topic. So I looked around a little bit on the site and I found the correct HTML address, the correct URL. So I've given her the correct one. But when you have that changes this entire reference page entry because now the URL is incorrect as well as the title. Okay, so there's not going to be very many points because this reference page entry is very wrong. It might be correct for this URL, but it's not what the rest of the annotation's talking about. So I know right there, Here's some problems. Okay, so then I go and look for my in-text citation, and it's missing. So there's another point off. So we've already had the potential for 4 points, and she's not going to be getting those points because everything is so off base. So you want to be very, very careful that you're paying attention to what you're putting here so that it does match the source. The absolute worst thing you can do as a researcher is to provide information for your reader that's inaccurate. Okay, so you really don't want to make anything up. Okay, we've looked at the APA citation information. Well, let's look at the content, right? Because there's still 6 points up for grab there. Okay, Jenny Alexander Lewis is a guest contributor for a magazine Americana, and that should be in italics because your book titles, magazine titles, journal titles should all be in italics. Okay, but so Jenny Alexander Lewis is a guest contributor and is an activist for women's rights. She has many articles published by Roskilde University inquiring in relations between men and women. Okay, so great. It is a relevant author, right? She's credible. So let's look at the summary then. So this specific article gives a close look at Real Women Have Curves. That should, since it's a movie title, that should also be italicized. A movie based off a 2-act play by Jennifer Lopez regarding the struggles Latinos are confronted with in American culture regarding body image. However, whenever I was on the site, the play is not actually written by Jennifer Lopez. It's written by Josefina Lopez. So there we've got another problem. We're giving more incorrect information. So that's going to be problematic. Okay, but we'll continue to go on. So the main character, Anna, is a young, heavy woman dealing with the pressures of traditional Latino expectations of being an obedient wife and homemaker. Anna yearns for self-validation, taking on American views of second-wave feminism. The article used the movie's dramatic plot to discuss the implications Latino women feel from both Anglo and Latino beauty standards. The representations of Americanized Latinos like Jennifer Lopez and Mariah Carey show no diversity of Latino identity. By explaining Latino ancestral roots and American pop influence, Duenwald helps distinguish the effects of Americans idealizing one specific type on young girls. Thin waist, light skin, blonde hair, full face of makeup, and dripping in expensive things. So it is a pretty good summary of the article, and it was an excellent article that was very in-depth, but we've got more problems here. First of all, right here, we say Duenwald helps distinguish the effects. Well, who is Duenwald, right? Our author here is this Jenny Alexander Lewis. Where does this person come in and how do they fit? So that's a big question that hasn't been clarified. It's probably an indirect quote taken from the article. So Lewis is quoting Duenwald. But in this case, that hasn't been explained. So this is not going to work because we don't know who this person is or why they're credible. It could be anyone. It could be somebody just walking down the street named Duenwald who helps distinguish the effects, right? How do we know that that person is an expert in that field, right? In identity. So we don't have that information, so that's a problem. So we've got kind of some okay information on the credibility, some okay information on the summary, but some of the summary information is outright incorrect, and some of it isn't properly explained. So you want to make sure that you are being clear that even though you've read the source, the next person who's reading this annotation will understand what you're trying to say. Okay, so and that's some of the problems that are there. It's also unclear how this is supporting the thesis statement. There's no discussion of the relevancy, so there were a lot of points missed there as well. Learn from this, look at this, try to see what other information maybe you don't know about it and what you're wondering about it, and that might help you in looking at your own. Now, in these examples, you've noticed a lot of them have covered the same kind of format, talking about credibility, summary, relevance. You can follow that pattern, or you can break apart and talk about the summary first and then talk about the credibility. Maybe start with the relevance. It's completely up to you as long as they're all there and it's clear that they're there. Okay, so don't be afraid to do what our great example did here. So this evidence-based information supports my thesis to improve patient discharge and the continuation of care. So I know exactly what subpoint, I know how it's doing it. I can see how it's going to be used. You might even go even further and say, I'm going to use this and this and this. Remember that while the annotated bibliography is a tool for other people who are looking into this subject matter area, for the purposes of this class, we really want you to be able to have a nice place to go to find information when you're writing the paper. So if you're scratching your head and you're saying, oh man, who had financial information about readmissions? I can come in, skim through my annotated bibliography entries, and see, oh, look right there. There it is. This is the source I need to go back to get some support. So use it as a tool. Use it as a way to help you improve your writing. Okay, so that is a good overview of what you should expect from the annotated bibliography. I'm sorry this was a little long, but I wanted to give you a good in-depth look. If you have additional questions or if you'd like to look over some of your entries with me, please let me know. I'm happy to help, and happy writing.